Here's a terrifying question. What happens when the world's factory runs out of workers? China's real population numbers suggest that we're about to find out. I'm going to show you why China's transition to a wartime economy may be their only option, what it means for your financial future. I'm Evan Goldstein, and I'm a licensed professional engineer. and a data scientist. I'm building the AI Capitalist channel to get leaders and thinkers like you the real lowdown on what's going on with labor, capital, and technology. For the past few decades, those of us on the capitalist side of the world have been in a position where we depend on the iron-fisted communists to do our dirty work for us. Now, there's been some talk of using communism with Chinese characteristics as a sort of face-saving euphemism for a transition to capitalism in China. But as I'll get into later, what China is really doing isn't transferring to a capitalist economy. They're moving communism just a little smidge over into communism's conjoined twin brother, fascism. Okay, more on that later, but the main point is that we depend on China to be the world's factory in order to keep wages low in the United States. And we've made ourselves dependent on a steady stream of hundreds of millions of Chinese human machines to keep the factories running. Now, this population problem that we're going to talk about has some serious ramifications, because first off, China's stock market might actually be super inflated right now, even though it's already pretty shaky. And if you're keeping tabs on global population statistics, they might actually be way lower than we think. For a while now, it's been pretty clear that China's population figures are sketchy. On the flip side, Nigeria was always looked at as the big, great white hope. Maybe I should word that differently. But guess what? This isn't just a China thing. Nigeria has its own issues too. They hand out oil money to provinces based on how many people they claim to have in each province. And there's nobody watching over those numbers. So there's a huge incentive to exaggerate. And come on, it's a developing country, so how reliable do we think those numbers are going to be? It reminds me of the Blue Zone scandal. Blue zones are those areas in the world where people live crazy long lives compared to the rest of the world and even towns and villages around where they are. It turned out that a lot of these supposed old folks weren't actually alive. It was just that the family members who survived them were cashing in on their pensions pretending that they were still around. People are lying about their populations just to rake in more cash. So I really think that we might need to rethink the global population numbers because they could be way below what we all believe. Specifically, China doesn't have a 1.4 billion population. It's probably under 1 billion and likely has been for a while. A lot of this information comes from a research show called Lay's Real Talk, and it makes a great point about China's birth stats being inflated. A researcher dug into the numbers comparing official birth data with BCG vaccination records. A BCG vaccination is something that every baby gets within the first day, so the number of vaccines should closely align with the number of births. Between 2008 and 2021, they found that the number of BCG vaccines given was consistently lower than the official birth statistics were. Between 2008 and 2021, they found that the number of BCG vaccines given was consistently lower than what the official birth statistics had claimed. Altogether, over those 14 years, that's about 58 million births that didn't add up right. And if we backtrack to the 80s, when China's economic change kicked off, they could be overestimating the population by about 178 million people. But there's more. There's the Lunar New Year travel data, which shows a big drop in travel between 2019 and 2023, especially among lower income people. Lunar New Year is when everyone heads out to see family, so a big drop in travel suggests a possible population decline. For example, in 2019, there were almost 3 billion trips made, but in 2023, that number dropped to about 1.5 billion, which is a 47% decrease. Breaking it down, higher income travelers mostly use planes and trains, and their numbers dropped by only 15%, but bus and car travel for lower income people plummeted. And if we assume around 422 million people, about 30% of the official count, that didn't travel because of poverty or age in 2019, it makes sense that there could be a potential drop of 556 million people who didn't hit the road in 2023. So something's definitely off there. One argument is that a lot of this unexplained decline could be due to unreported COVID-19 deaths. Argument is that a lot of this unexplained decline could be due to the global virus that hit a few years ago. Sorry, I have to use euphemisms to avoid the YouTube algorithm suppressing my content. But we were all there. So not only is this population less than reported, but they might be covering up a significant number of deaths from the pandemic. So she has a different episode where she goes into kindergarten closures because there was a sudden increase in kindergarten closures, where 20% closed year over year this last year. And she says that this indicates that a lot of people either died during or something like it. And they decrease in specific regions at really high levels, specifically in smaller towns. We don't have the rural data, but she argues that the country could have lost more than 20% of its population simply from deaths, which is insane, but not uncommon for Chinese history. And some of the Chinese Communist Party's behavior indicates that this is the case. The next is the salt consumption analysis, and this was an analysis of regional salt consumption data, which suggests that China's population is significantly lower than official figures. Salt consumption per capita is relatively stable. By analyzing regional salt sales and data known per capita consumption rates, one can calculate the population. The basic salt intake numbers range from 8.5 to 11.5 grams of salt per person per day. And with that data, they figured out the estimated population and then compared it to the official figures. From 2000 until 2014, the calculated population was 19.29% lower than what the official numbers said. And then from 2015 to 2022, it jumped to around 31% lower. So it looks like there's been some serious over-reporting going on for a while. And now with the sickness data, they aren't even talking about what's really happening, because clearly they seem to have lost about 10% of their population, which is 100 million people. When you apply that 31% drop to the official 2022 population figure of 1.4 billion, you get an estimated population of around 986 million. What's wild is that there are multiple studies backing this up. It's not just one person's findings. So then she took another approach and compared China's reported fertility rate to India's in their starting population. She found that Chinese population growth looked way higher than it should have when stacked next to India. Now, some people might be saying, oh, it's because China has better healthcare. But she did a deeper dive into lifespan increases between the two countries, and she found that India actually had a bigger increase during that time. And this suggests that the numbers that we're seeing might be way, way off. Also, there were Russian and Japanese studies estimating China's population at around 800 million. A Russian expert, Viktor Makov, even said that China's official number, which is supposedly 1.5 billion, is a total exaggeration. Classic China stuff. Their system, where different regions get bonuses of funding, leads to big-time problems. Their system, where different regions get bonuses or funding based on population growth, leads to some pretty big problems. One of her calculations even put the real population at around 944 million. It's not like people haven't noticed this either. The Atlantic even ran a piece named, "Can a million Chinese people die and nobody know?" Basically, you can't trust the official numbers because they play into Beijing's agenda. And the real burning question is, can 100 million Chinese people die and nobody know? While you're thinking about whether there's one thing that I hope you do care about, and that's helping this channel grow. If you like this content, please push the like button. It helps let me know that I'm making your type of content, and it helps spread that content to others. I thank you genuinely for your support. So making dead people disappear is a whole other story. There's evidence showing underreporting, like satellite images showing super busy crematoria during the outbreak and domestic videos of overwhelmed hospitals that got scrubbed from social media. Google searches related to funerals indicated around 712,000 excess deaths, almost a million, from December 22 to February 2023. Still, that's 2 orders of magnitude lower than the 100 million person gap. In her recent videos, she brought up something interesting regarding Xi Jinping, who's the dictator of China. Why isn't he making smart moves to help his economy or his people during these tough times? The theory is that he might be shifting toward a wartime economy, which wouldn't be driven by what consumers want, but by centralized production. During wartime, you get what the government gives you, and the government better get its tanks. Are there signs that they're actually centralizing their productions? Yeah. First of all the billionaires seem to be disappearing, and then they're taking major industries under state control. And here's where it gets really deep. The line between a socialist and a fascist state often comes down to who controls the economy. In a socialist system, the idea is to share the wealth more equally. In a fascist state, it's focused on putting an ideology and then keeping certain elites in power. A lot of folks don't get how serious this is. China's moving toward a fascist economic model, with the authority tightening its grip over production in a way that boosts the power of existing elites. They might even know that an economic collapse is on the horizon. The whole situation has felt like a Ponzi scheme for a while, banking on foreign investments that can't even get their money out anymore, similar to what happened in Japan in the 1980s, but 100 times worse. So what does this mean for the future? If they're sitting on a wartime economy, does it mean that they're going to try to grab Taiwan quicker? Yeah. They probably wanted to make a move on Taiwan already, but Russia's blunder in Ukraine has made them rethink that conflict. But my gut feeling is they were already gearing up for a shift towards this wartime mentality before long. Keeping wages low in the United States was based partly on importing vast numbers of off-the-books workers from over the southern border, but the supply of labor was also outsourced to now fascist China. And it's not a coincidence that the current political climate in the United States is on fire over this issue, with Democrats pushing to suppress the wages of working people and Republicans pushing for policies that would elevate wages but would probably also cause inflation. But the fact is, none of it matters because China is just out of people anyway. Artificial intelligence is shaping to be the next big labor destroyer, and all the talk is of it attacking white-collar jobs first. Let's be honest, if you hold down the 9 to 5, how many mid-level HR managers do you actually need? But with advances in robotics, if we aren't careful, this has the potential to turn into another method of destroying the wages of working people, and that may cause us to end up with a revolution on our hands.